Hello. So first off, I just wanted to say thank you for a great semester. Thank you for your investment into our learning community and how much I've truly gained from this class. For the final project, I decided to interview one of my good friends. Her name is Felicia Walker, and she has a very interesting story. Not only is she different from me, um, both racially, socioeconomically, gender, but she just has a lot of cool experiences that I didn't know about before I was able to uh, conduct this interview with her. So I just kind of want to recap a few of the things that she said, and the few of the things that I took away from the class that I got to integrate into the interview, to chat with her about. So basically, Felicia's story, she's from Johnson County, which is predominantly a white upper class society, and she kind of grew up in the Olathe Overland Park area, in a predominantly white school, so she was more so the minority in her school. Um, as she was growing up, I kind of learned that she didn't necessarily think about the aspect of race, um, in elementary school, but as she began to move through high school, it became more known to her, more evident that specifically the race groups would begin to group together and people would more or less click with those that they identified their race with. So, um, growing up, Felicia came from a mixed family, as she identified herself with, and she identified herself as a mixed race more growing up. But when her parents divorced, when she was younger, she had a white mother and an African American father, and so her father, once their parents divorced, put a lot of, not necessarily pressure, but put a lot of influence on her to be proud of her race. And so that's when she turned more to identifying her race as African American. I think because she didn't have as good of a relationship with her mother, so she started to identify more with that. She had a few instances that were really interesting, that kind of I wanted to touch on. The Is Everyone Really Equal book, just the idea of prejudice and discrimination. There's one part that I like that says prejudice is learning prejudgment towards social others and refers to internal thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and assumptions based on groups to which they belong. And Felicia shared with me a really cool story about how when she was younger, she was eating at a restaurant with her family, and she has a white mother and an African American father, and she came to some people walked by and they were asking, "Oh, are you adopted?" Because she had a white mother. People were asking about adoption, and she was really confused. But her parents did really well at processing through that situation with her, and being able to touch on that. So that kind of just falls into the idea of attitudes and assumptions towards people of a different race that you might experience in that realm. And then in high school, she had an experience where she was walking home with some of her friends that identified themselves as African American race, and somebody drove by that was of the white race, and they shouted out the N-word towards her and her friends. And it's not necessarily, she said it wasn't something that affected her so much as it did some of her other friends, that they just really felt hurt by that. And and obviously there was nothing that they could do at that point because the people have just driven off. But really, to say that racism is still out there, I know that's a huge aspect that we talked about this semester. I know a big question was, have we moved past the aspect of racism? And I don't think we have. I think we have gained a more inclusive society, but we will never be to that point of full inclusion of other races, which is sad, but there's always going to be those extremists that have biased opinions towards people of other races. So that was just a time that she experienced that kind of inequality that somebody had impressed on her. As for her educators, I kind of got to ask her a little bit about her experience being a minority in the schools, and she said she was really impressed with how her teachers didn't discriminate, at least externally. They didn't voice those discriminations, but she wished that her teachers would have talked about it more. Not that it became a huge issue in her school, but she made a good point that once students moved on after high school, they would come into maybe a bigger college experience where they might see others of different races, and it would be great to cover those topics from elementary school up into high school, which is something that she had never experienced until she got to college. She never really had the chance to talk about racism, to talk about different races, and really have a educational discussion on those topics. So I thought that was a great point, that something that I learned over this past semester is us as future teachers, how we can integrate those topics of how can we bring up racism, how can we bring up bullying, how can we bring up gender equality in the classroom. And I think it all starts at the base with getting to know our students personally, getting to know their history, what do they identify with, which is huge. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from this semester for sure is that idea of truly investing in each one of my students, having a intentional conversation with them on a daily basis, to not only talk about academics, but to find out what is going on at home, what aspects of their home life are they struggling with, to really create that open connection where your students feel like they can come and talk to you about anything, and they have a safe place to come and talk to you with. And as we kind of talked a little bit about race, I then asked her a few questions about her gender, which she identifies with as a female. And growing up, this played a big role in her life, especially in the education system as well, because she was very into sports, and she was very into the not necessarily stereotypical things that we've covered in class that women identify with, or that are societal impacts that are placed on women, such as wearing dresses, putting on makeup. And so as she grew into high school, she kind of felt those pressures on her. And even back in elementary school, she remembered times that she would get picked last for kickball or for any games that they would be playing at recess, because she was a female, and the boys looked down on her because she wasn't strong enough or she wasn't good enough. So that was really interesting to just learn on how I as a male have definitely done those things, but teaching those kids younger that it's not about gender, and girls can be just as strong as men can. And that's just one thing that she remembered, and has had a big influence on how she identifies with the female gender today. And another section of the book from it, Is Everyone Really Equal, just talks about oppression. I thought it fit really well into the topic of gender, and so it just says, to oppress is to hold down, to press and deny a social group full access and potential in a given society. Prejudice and discrimination plus power equals oppression. And as I was talking to Felicia, a big part of how she identified with the female gender was the aspect of power in society. And her father has really done a great job at influencing her and not limiting the power that she has. And that's a huge thing that she says that she identifies with today, is sticking up for herself, being powerful as a woman, because society looks down on women for being emotionally weak, or whatever comes with that. So as she was talking, she kind of felt more empowered to go do those things, and society kind of pushes her to be better at the things that she does. And she kind of uses that power struggle of women in the past to fuel her and to push her to be better and to better herself for things of the future. And just kind of as I wrap up, she had a really cool quote, and she said, it would be awesome to see educators make students feel comfortable, accepted in life, and sharing what they're thinking. So as we kind of process through that, she was talking about how no matter what aspect you're talking about in schools, it's great to see a video on bullying, a video on race, but when you break it down with your class, that's something that she wishes she had in her education system, that her teacher would have broken it down and really allowed time to process through those topics with the students. And I think it ties back into that parent-teacher relationship that we talked about kind of at the end of the year. The idea that teachers and parents have a huge influence in the student's life, and the student's learning goes way beyond the classroom, and how we as teachers can not only have an effect on the student, but an effect on the parent. And talking about those things at home and at school, there should be an open relationship with the parents to continue on that process and making sure the parents are on the same page as you. And I think that's a great thing to establish at parent-teacher conferences, back to school night, through emails, whatever interactions you have with parents. Just that open communication of, are you comfortable talking through these things with your students? Because these are not necessarily academic things that will be addressed in the class, but societal influences that have an effect on your student day to day and can affect them emotionally, both at school and at home. So it was just awesome talking to Felicia, hearing her side of the story, how she was able to flourish and really learn from the community that she grew up in, which was so different from her peers around her. And I just wanted to thank you for a great semester. Thank you for just the awesome facilitations that we had and the chance to grow. And thanks for the example of a true teacher's investment into their students and the impact that I know you've had on me and my peers in Block B this semester. I really just benefited from learning how I can invest deeper in my students, and that teaching goes so much beyond service level, beyond that curriculum in the classroom, but really it's about building those lifelong relationships with your students, which I think you've done an awesome job of setting that example in the classroom this semester. So thanks again, and hope you have a great summer.